Hi everyone, welcome back to session 2. We have Pekka, who is the creator of the robot framework. And he's the lead developer, I should also add, an open source test framework for acceptance testing and acceptance test-driven development. Pekka likes consulting about Agile and test automation and takes training courses on implementing all of the above. Robot frameworks got a very good reputation, so I'm really looking forward to this talk. As before, as Pekka's talking, if you can start adding your questions into the Q&A interface within Zoom, I will moderate them and then kind of ask out the questions at the end to Pekka, and so kind of do get them in. Other than that, I will hand over to him and let him carry on with the rest of this talk. Thanks, Pekka.
Yeah, my name is Pekka Klärck, and I'm independent consultant and lead developer and creator of Robot Framework, which is also the topic of this presentation here today. I'm going to first slide information about the framework, not much slideware here, and then I'm going to show a demo of how to create test cases. So we'll actually have a ready-made test case, show how to run them and so on. And then we are also going to take a quick look at how to create libraries for Robot Framework. So Robot Framework, being a generic automation framework, means two things. First, that it's not only a web testing tool or REST API testing tool or something. And another thing that it means is that it's not only a test automation tool anymore. So it's also nowadays a tool that you can use for other kind of automation, like RPA, for example, robotic process automation. But in these presentations that hopefully we finally get started soon, I'm going to concentrate only on the testing. So we got through that Robot Framework is a generic automation framework, meaning that you can test basically any kind of applications with it, not only web, and also it's not only test automation framework, it's also framework that you can use for other kind of automation. The framework has been implemented using Python, and Python is also the language you most often use when you want to extend the framework. And extending most of the time means writing new extension libraries for the framework, but it can also mean other things like implementing a listener that gets notification during test execution, or implementing tools for post-processing results, or implementing tools for manipulating test cases before execution and stuff like that. So there are many kind of extension APIs, libraries being most commonly used. It's an open source framework. It was open source, I think, 2008, so it's been available for a while. It was before that developed internally at Nokia Networks for 3 years, and before that, where the original concept comes from is my master's thesis that I did something like 15 years ago. I had a concept there, studied different kind of automation frameworks, and came up with this kind of solution. And then it was developed, as I said, first internally at Nokia Networks, and then they open sourced it. And they also were for a long time sponsoring the development, even when it was open source. But nowadays we have Robot Framework Foundation there, who is collecting money from companies using the framework, and also from conferences and so on, and then sponsoring the development. So although it's open source, we have kind of this kind of a financial backing there, so that it's in pretty good, has a pretty solid, well foundation there. The last slide I want to show is this one about architecture. So the bottom box there, of course, every time the most important box for you, that's the system you are testing or system you want to interact with. Otherwise, if you are doing some other kind of automation. On top there, then we have some data where we are creating test cases or tasks, if doing some other than test automation. Then Robot Framework is going to parse that data. And from there it sees that, okay, are there tests, are there tasks, and starts executing them. Those tests or tasks, they are created from keywords. So this is a keyword-driven framework. And keywords are implemented either as part of the data, like Robot Framework own syntax, or in libraries, which are then, as I said, most commonly implemented using Python. So then you go to a real programming language. Libraries then can interact directly with systems if needed, or they can use external tools like, for example, Selenium or Puppeteer or Playwright or something like this for web testing, and then, of course, for other kind of interfaces, some other tools. The demo that I'm going to show is using Robot Framework's probably most commonly used ready-made library called Selenium library, which obviously uses the Selenium tool internally. But there's also at the moment work going on developing a library for using that is using Playwright, so other kind of other solution for web testing then as well. But it's still on prototype phase, so not something that I wanted to show here. Selenium library and this forthcoming Playwright library, they are only like some examples of ready-made libraries. There are ready-made libraries for many other things available. You can go to robotframework.org and find a big list of them for things like REST APIs, databases, different kind of UI technologies, and also stuff like mainframes and SAP and stuff like this. So we're really like a versatile ecosystem. But the cool thing is that you can also easily create your own custom libraries. But let's go to the demo because we spent so much time with the hassle there in the beginning. So let's see. Here we have a simple test case on the left side opened in my editor. And in the test case, we are testing that we can log in to some application. This is a very simple kind of dummy application there. And the test case is constructed from keywords, first being open browse to login page, which obviously opens a browser and goes to login page, and then typing in valid username and passwords and so on. Well, me reading this out loud for you makes no sense because you can read and you can very easily understand what's happening there. I can run it like that. There's a robot command. I've installed the framework, of course. There's a robot command, and then I give it the path to the file where this is implemented using custom extension as well. And then I run it, and it goes very fast, so we cannot really see anything there. But well, it succeeded. Before I go and show how the log file looks, let's see how this is actually implemented, because this is just a keyword here, open browse to login page, and it's kind of domain-specific keyword. It's definitely not a keyword that we could get from any ready-made library like that Selenium library. So that is really domain-specific keyword here, and that keyword is implemented using Robot Framework own syntax. It could be implemented directly in library. That would be possible as well. So we could then from here directly go to code. That approach works well if you have a lot of developers there and want to kind of just have the high-level test description in kind of manager-friendly format. But this approach that you can create high-level keywords in Robot Framework own syntax works then well if you have less technical people, because syntax to create these keywords is pretty straightforward. So here we have another file that was a test case file. Then now we have a resource file where we have defined some reusable higher level keywords like this open browse to login page. That is then constructed from two other keywords, open browser and title should be, both taking certain arguments. And these keywords, open browser, title should be, they come from Selenium library. So they are from this library that's imported here that contains generic keywords for web testing, obviously using Selenium. So that one opens a browser to the provided URL, which is defined here as a variable, and then uses a browser that is also specified as a variable being Chrome by default. So, and then there are other keywords. And as you can see, the high-level syntax is pretty straightforward and easy to learn. Then if you need to have keywords that as arguments, for example, things get a bit more complicated in special syntax for that, but relatively simple and straightforward anyway. Nothing really complicated there. I already executed that test there, but I can also, and I was using Chrome because that's the default, but I can easily run it also like this. So I say, use variable command option, set I want to override browser variable and use Firefox instead. So then it uses Firefox. Adding sleeps to your test is of course always a bad idea, but I could actually add here sleep, like 3 seconds to pause the execution so we can see that it actually got something up. So we can see that there's that kind of login page, and then it fills out the form, and that's it. So that's kind of high level how test cases created with Robot Framework look like. We construct them from keywords, and keywords are implemented either in libraries, directly in programming code, or in this high level syntax here in Robot Framework data level. This is a kind of workflow test, doing something and then validating the results. In addition to using this style, we could also be using like given when then style made popular by Cucumber, so that similar kind of Gherkin syntax works. It's not the same Gherkin syntax that Cucumber uses, but you can create similar test cases. We could also create data-driven test cases if we needed to repeat same workflows multiple times. And here we have an example going through different kind of invalid login scenarios, like invalid username, invalid password, and both being invalid and so on. I'm not going to go through this syntax. I wasn't planning in the beginning even to go through it, how it works. And then now I have even less time. So, but well, the idea is that it's pretty, we can in kind of a condensed table see what are our test cases and what are the values that we are going to iterate through. There's some red underlining here because the editor plugin that I'm using doesn't understand that syntax that well, but that situation is hopefully going to get better in the future because there's a project going on developing language server protocol implementation for other Robot Framework, and then our editor support is hopefully going to be a lot better. There would actually be for Visual Studio Code already now pretty good plugin using that LSP solution. I can run these invalid login test cases as well very easily, like that. All 106 test cases, or I can run all test cases in this folder, in this login test folder, by just executing that. And then it's going to execute all these robot files within the folder. So there were 2. So now I got 7 test cases run. After execution, we got this console output during the execution, but after execution, we also got 3 output files, out.xml being XML file containing all information about the execution for machines like CI systems and so on. They can read information there. And this log and report, they are then for humans. Report is more high level. It contains just basically statistics, and it's not very interesting now that we have only this many test cases here, and they are all passing even. So but if you have more test cases, then statistics that you get based on speeds or based on tags that you could add to those test cases starts getting much more interesting. And then it's also easy to see how many test cases are failing, and then when you select all test cases and so on, the failing tests are first. Easily go to them. So and then here from this list, for example, I can go click there, and it goes to the log file that contains much more detailed information about the execution. So statistics in the beginning as well, but then we have the full execution log saying that we executed test suite called login tests. That was created automatically from that folder that I run. So that folder was automatically a test suite. I don't need to do anything extra. I have suite called invalid that was created from that invalid.robot file. Again, no need to do anything extra. That file is a suite. There we have then those test cases, and then there's also that valid suite created from the valid robot file that has that valid logging test case that contains all these keywords that we were using, and we can drill down because this open browse to login page was a user keyword or a high level keyword. We can drill down to individual keywords here, and then we can see these keywords from Selenium library, they've been logging something that what they were doing and so on. Few more nesting level, one more nesting level here, typing valid username, calling typing username, and then finally calling input text from Selenium library. Yeah, so that's what we get here then, kind of for free. So one of the biggest strengths with Robot Framework is that you get nice logs and reports. You just describe your test cases or, well, tasks in this way, and then depending on your needs or depending on your team structure, you can create these keywords here then directly in code if you feel that that's a better way, or then using Robot Framework's own syntax if you have people who are not that experienced programmers. The last thing that I want to show is then that we'll take a quick look on how those libraries look like. I don't want to show the Selenium library because it's so big that it would be hard to understand what's happening there. It's not that complicated code, but still it's a huge library. So instead, I'm going to show you a really, really simple, trivial library. Here, this one. And this is actually also showing you how to use Robot Framework for REST API testing, because what this library is doing is that it's making a REST request. You could, for REST API testing, very easily create your own library, but also there are ready-made libraries available. And depending on your needs, you can use them, or sometimes creating your own is more flexible source. So here what we have, not everybody probably here knows Python that well, but this is a Python file, so which is automatically a module in Python. And here we have a function called getUser that takes one argument called ID. And this alone is for Robot Framework a library. So this module creates a library for robot. This key function getUser creates a keyword that accepts one argument. And then this Python code is executed. It's using the excellent request module, Python request module, creating a get request, making a get request to that JSON placeholder, fake REST API that's available there, and gets a user with that ID, prints text, response text, basically its body, and it's printed, and that means that it ends up going to Robot Framework log file. Robot would also have a logging API, but this way we can also, this is adequate for simple needs, just to print it and it goes to the log file. We can check the status like this, that if the status wasn't okay, then this will raise an exception that will be then caught by Robot Framework, and that will report it as an error. If that doesn't occur, then we are going to return that JSON data from there. So really simple keyword, but already doing something actually somewhat useful. It's used here, by the way, like this. This is not as nice as the earlier test case. This is definitely not like a good example of Robot Framework test. They should typically be kind of high level and easy to understand. This looks more like programming. But well, the idea is mainly to demonstrate how that keyword works. You would then, in real life project, hide this complexity with assignments and so on inside those user keywords. Or alternatively, you could make that library more intelligent, make it have a state and so on. So then you could also directly here use kind of a better keyword. But I can show how to run it. Well, same robot command again. And like that, it's really fast. Now there's not even browser opening, so nothing really to see. But we can go to the log file here again, and we can see that that was executed. We called that JSON placeholder library getUser keyword. It logged the response body, so we can go see that it got this this user there, and then these validations that there was name was Leon Graham and city was Quemborough. They are also successful. So that's about it. So sorry again for the issues in the beginning. I needed to go a bit faster here than I was planning, but I hope you got some idea about this. And if you have any questions, go ahead.
Oh, thank you for that, Pekka. That was really good. And there are a few questions and some really nice ones. I like them. The first one, what inspired you to create this framework?
I needed to graduate from the university, and I needed to do master's thesis. So I needed to study something, and I had been working. One reason it took so long for me to graduate was that I had been already working while studying, and I had implemented several automation frameworks back then. And I had noticed that okay, there are some kind of common needs all the time, like how to create log files and how to create test cases. And although the domains were totally different, there were a lot of kind of common needs, and I was thinking that there must be a better way, and there must be a way to have at least some kind of common components. And that was what I was studying then. I read everything basically that was written back then about automation frameworks in early 2000, and started creating prototypes of data-driven frameworks and keyword-driven frameworks. And then I realized that when I created a keyword-driven framework with some like additions, like setups and theaters, I don't remember what was missing, but that some additions, then it could actually be a generic. So my initial plan was that, okay, maybe we could create kind of a reusable parser or maybe some kind of logger. But then the kind of major finding there was that, okay, it's possible to have a generic framework that allows you to have a uniform way to construct tests, and then also does logging for you and so on.
Cool.
So that's kind of how it happened.
The one of our talks yesterday from Thomas Reuters, Thomson Reuters. I'm just sorry, I just got to check my notes. They showed kind of how they were using robot framework
Cool.
in their everyday usage, which leads quite nicely into kind of a group of questions like, is it like, what doesn't robot framework support, and kind of like, can people use it to automate Oracle EBS, so kind of Java applications with robots, or is it kind of just web stuff and kind of API stuff?
The framework itself doesn't, if you remember the architecture diagram, the framework actually, the core framework knows nothing about any system. So the framework alone cannot do anything, but with suitable libraries, you can basically test or automate anything then. And I think there are ready-made libraries for Oracle EBS, but I don't know. I never used them, and so I don't know. But I think there might be. So it's always kind of a question that if the question is, can you automate this with robot, is that, well, you actually see that is there ready-made solution for this? And if there is, then you just kind of go ahead and start using it and check how it works. If there isn't, then the question is that is there a tool available that you can use, and then how hard it would be to create a library for robot that utilizes that tool internally.
Okay.
So I think there's a ready-made library for that, but I don't count on that. Go to robotframework.org, check it out, or just, well, Google or whatever is your favorite search engine, and Google for robot framework and that particular topic, and you'll hopefully find something.
Cool. Since everything is keyword driven, is there a central repository of existing keywords, or kind of some sort of auto completion plugin that people could kind of add to their IDEs?
There's no central repository for everything. There's one reason being that lots of the libraries are implemented with Python, so they are in Python package index, obviously. But then you can also implement libraries using Java if you are using Python, and then those tend to be in Maven Central, so there's no single place where you could get everything. Robotframework.org tries to be kind of a central information hub, or well, it is, and the libraries are listed there, but that's not exhaustive list. We are not kind of constantly looking for new libraries. We basically expect people to tell us that when they've created something and something should be added. But well, so I'd say go there, and then, as I said, simple net web search is easy. It is typically the easiest way to find out that is there a library for you. Then if you install a library, then as I mentioned, this IDE situation is that it's hopefully it's getting better now. We have the language server protocol implementers, and I don't know, does everybody know what LSP is? But it's basically how Visual Studio Code implements it's a protocol it uses for communicating with plugins, but it's generally kind of a standard, well, not official standard, but anyway, it's open protocol, and other IDEs also support it via own plugins or something. So once that works better, then it makes it a lot easier to create plugins for different IDEs.
Okay.
But there are already for many.
Cool. Is it possible to kind of output your test results to something like TestRail? Is that possible, or is that just like, is there someone would need to find a plugin for that?
I think there is a plugin for that, but again, don't count on me. It's basically that output XML that tools can parse. It's not part of Robot Framework core. I really try to keep the core as kind of small as possible. It cannot be that small, but still stuff like this is out of the core. So it's basically an additional kind of plugin that can read the output XML, or maybe utilize the listener interface that I briefly already mentioned, that can get notification already during execution about something. So you can update results already then. So those are plugins. And I know there has been a lot of discussion about TestRails, and people have some solutions, but I don't know what is the actual status with that.
Okay. There's a few questions around, like, are you aware of people using Robot Framework with mobile, so kind of hooking it into Appium and things like that to?
Yeah. There are libraries for that as well. There's an Appium library, and there are a few. That's kind of a beauty of open source, that there are often so many solutions, but also kind of annoying that you need to check out the different solutions. How do they work? I know there are several mobile libraries for robot, but I don't know how actively they are maintained these days and what is the best one. So I cannot give direct recommendations, but I know people are using it, and I know there are ready-made solutions. You can also, of course, always create your own.
Yeah. Okay. We've got a few questions on kind of debuggability of robot, like, you know, is there a way to get screenshots put into the report, and kind of like, can people kind of just debug into the keywords from, like, if they've got this set up, can they kind of debug into things to see how things are working and not working? Is it easy to do that?
That's to some extent related to how libraries work. So libraries can do something automatically. For example, Selenium library automatically takes a screenshot when something goes wrong. If one of its own keywords fails, it takes a screenshot showing where you are. Other libraries could do something similar. Then there's also libraries also for taking screenshots in general. I mean, that you can just record your screen using those keywords, like take a screenshot or something. So you can add those explicitly. So that's possible. You could also be running stuff on a kind of a container that is recording everything. That might be a better solution. I think there are these kind of solutions as well. That's of course not Robot Framework solution at all, but just basically a container or something. So it records what's happening there. So that's what you can do. Then you can also, the log file, you can embed images, videos, stuff like that there via the robots logging API. The question about wait, there was other part of the question.
Like debuggability,
Exactly. Yeah, that's actually a bit challenging, because everything that is actually done, that actually gets something really, really done, happens in library, which is most of them Python. So you basically in the Python, then you would use a Python debugger for that. But if you want to then see what's happening on Robot Framework side, you would need a Robot Framework kind of a debugger. nothing built in Robot Framework, but some of the editors have something. And the listener API that now I already actually mentioned twice, it allows you to do something. It's kind of, well, it's not the debugger API, but it's basically something that allows you to create a debugger. And in a forthcoming, the next bigger release, we are hopefully going to be able to enhance that API so that you get something like line numbers where you are in Robot Framework test via that API. It's not possible at the moment. So there are some solutions, but it's not as good as it could be and should be, but that's also something that I expect to be better by the end of the year already.
Okay, very cool. And then there's so many questions on it, but I've only got to pick one. We only have time for one. How easy is it to manage multiple environments? Like, is it a simple case of like, if you've got like, how would you set this up? Because obviously, like, you know, Robot delegates down to a lot of frameworks, but like, how easy is it generally to set up multiple like platform support? So if you wanted like a Windows support and Linux, and how easy is it to kind of get that all set up and installed and Robot working everywhere? Is it just like it should just work?
As everybody probably knows, that's in general not very easy, and like, well, cross-browser testing and stuff like that, it's not easy. Well, based on the previous presentation, it seems that that's also hopefully getting better. But yeah, so it's the Robot Framework is not kind of doesn't solve your problems, but it's not going to cause you problems either, because it's just a Python module that you can very easily install with pip, basically. So you just say pip install Robot Framework and you get it installed. Very easy to put into all kind of containers. Runs on Windows, runs on Linux, on OS X. Has some kind of built-in variables, for example, that like path separator, you can use a variable that will be / or / depending on the operating system and so on. So there's some things in the framework that helps you when creating kind of to create operating system independent test cases, for example. But yeah, that's of course always a challenge, but Robot Framework shouldn't be adding more problems for you. It should be easy to install, and you don't need licenses or anything like that, so you don't need to care. You can have it installed many times, and you can keep installing it all the time and so on. So it's yeah. But kind of related to that, I would say that the best place, the kind of the sweet spot for Robot Framework in general is this kind of a solution where you have different environments and need to have some kind of uniform way to construct your test cases. Maybe have a lot of different APIs, interfaces, so that there would be web and database and maybe some REST and so on. Because you can just plug in different libraries and still always create your tests or your tasks in kind of uniform way. You get uniform logs and reports. But that's kind of the idea where it has been designed to be used mostly, like in heterogeneous environments.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for that, Pekka.